Join us here in our roundtable, NCRPO Chief Oscar Albayalde. He is the first, or he was the first to confirm last Friday that the burial was going on at the moment. And we are also joined by House Deputy Speaker Freddy Neil Castro and Professor Ed Garcia. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being here. Salamat. Well, let's begin with this. Our two main questions here are how did we get here and where do we go from here? Here meaning last Friday we had that burial, secret, surprise burial of former President Marcos. So of course the question in most everyone's minds is, paano tayo nakarating doon? Professor Garcia, would you like to start?
Well, first of all, I think the burial is an utter disregard for historical facts. Marcos is no hero. He was a fraud. The medals that he supposedly received were actually not real. He was convicted really of the malversation of billions of pesos and the human rights violations, illegal detention, torture, extrajudicial executions, and disappearances took place during the period of martial law. And these are, by the sovereign act of the people, they deposed him. So he does not deserve to be buried at the libingan ng mga bayani.
In spite of the fact that he is a former president, in spite of the fact that he was deposed, in spite of the fact that there is a Supreme Court vote on
Well, he was deposed as the president of the Philippines by the sovereign act of the Filipino people, which was recognized. That's why we had a new government. And the Constitution, which I helped to draft, actually was crafted in the context of people's power, the people's resistance to dictatorship. And finally, it is the worst example to our young people. He is no hero.
Congressman Castro, you said that you believe that the government and the Marcos family did nothing wrong when they buried him last Friday.
Yes, I stand by my answer that President Duterte and the military, for example, they're not liable for anything. Neither could they be liable for contempt. Because in the first place, the restraining order, which the Supreme Court issued at the very inception of the filing of the petition, has already been lifted. In effect, if it was the intention of the Supreme Court that no burial shall take place during the time or during the 15-day period within which an appeal may be filed by the petitioners, then the Supreme Court could have said so. But the fact that the restraining order has already been lifted, to my mind, it was a go signal that burial may proceed.
The decision should have explicitly say that hindi pwede ang burial.
Yes.
Status quo ante-order continues until the 15-day.
Yes.
Okay. Of course, there are a lot of lawyers who agree with you. There are a lot of lawyers who don't agree with you. But when you say ang pinag-uusapan yung liability, no, because one of those liable, if we are to believe former President Fidel Ramos, is General Albayalde. Because apparently, sir, you knew about it the day before, right?
Yeah,
you were told
about it a day before around 5 p.m.
5 p.m.
Yes.
Yeah.
But then again, the Marcos family asked for, that it remained private and a secret. So,
so it was, sir. So it was someone from the Marcos family that called you. Who called you at 5 p.m.? Who told you?
Governor Aimee.
I see. So previous to that, meron na kayong usapan?
Yes, I had a meeting with the former Senator Bongbong Marcos like 2-3 weeks back, and then I had again a meeting with Governor Mikey last week, just before the funeral, and then I was informed only on Thursday afternoon about the actual date and time.
At yung usapan nyo was to keep everything quiet?
Yes.
Because?
Yeah. Well,
I mean, apart from the fact that they've already said, and we know that, they've said, no, we want this private and everything. Why didn't they want people to know? Why was it, kept...
well, I think that's up to them. That would be I presume it's a family decision.
Yes. So you were sworn to secrecy?
Yes.
Who in the Philippine National Police hierarchy knew? You and General De La Rosa? Who else knew?
I informed the Chief PNP right after I was informed.
Okay, and as far as you were concerned, there is no problem with the interpretation of what the Supreme Court decision will allow you to do.
We're not there to interpret on the Supreme Court whether he is allowed or not to be buried at the Libingan ng Bayani, or whether he's a hero or not. That's not for us to determine. We were just asked to render security and to maintain the peace and order where the bullet was ongoing.
Yeah. General Abayado, when you prepare for something like this, of course, you consider security and political scenarios. So were you preparing for, let's say the Marcos family said, okay, let's open this up to everybody, let's have a procession from Ilocos Norte to Manila. Were you prepared for that, and what scenarios would you have in mind?
Yeah, we've been preparing for that a month before, because right after the Supreme Court have decided to lift the TRO, we've been preparing for it. I think even with the Armed Forces of the Philippines, I think they've already been preparing for it already.
But pero ano yung na-imagine? Di ba sometimes you have to parang imagine a scenario, no? So let's say people would come out into the streets. Na-consider nyo ba yon? And
yes.
what would you have preferred? You know, if you're a police officer, you're tasked with securing the public peace, no, making sure everything is quiet and calm. Would you have preferred na open burial, everybody's out in the streets, or was this the better scenario?
Actually, we were prepared for any eventuality. We were prepared to have protesters, actually. So
you were more worried about the
yes,
protesters.
we were
You weren't worried about the
yes.
Marcos
Yes,
loyalists.
yes, we were worried about the Marcos loyalists and then the anti-Marcos meeting each other, then igniting violence. That's what we are afraid of.
Okay.
That's why we prepared enough CDM personnel, but we did not deploy them. We just waited if there will be a situation that will come out. Yes.
Okay. Ed Garcia, you want to say something?
Yes, I want to say something. First of all, for me, this was a treacherous act with an utter disregard for historical facts. An act
Treacherous act by the Marcos
by
family?
the Marcoses.
And the government.
And with the complicity of the president. You see, the reason is this, history will bear us out that the dictatorship was something that, destroyed many lives. They plundered our economy. And therefore, it's very important to recognize that if you revise history, you will be condemned to repeat it. It's very important that our youth are inspired by a new set of values, by the truth and by justice. And that's why I was part of the framing of the Constitution. The Constitution was drafted in the context of the people's resistance against dictatorship. That's why you will see there provisions that protect human rights, that ensure that no authoritarian rule would henceforth be part of our lives, that moves forward for our youth. However, this is a step backwards.
A step backwards, and that coming
and
from...
divides the people. It divides our people.
Yeah. Well, a step backwards, that coming from someone who's been a so-called street parliamentarian for, close to half a century.
I marched in the first quarter storm in the 1970s. I was part of the People's Power efforts in the 1980s.
Right.
And 2 days ago...
Kayo yung water cannon kasama si Chino Roses.
Yeah, that's right. I saw that in the picture just before I came in. And then I was there at Ayala Avenue 2 days ago. So the struggle for justice in this country requires a marathon mentality. And that's why I'm very glad that it's the millennials, the young people in the different schools who are actually marching in the streets.
Yeah.
Because we passed the baton. It's your turn. This is your moment. And now is the time to actually live up the ideals of what we fought for many years ago.
But are you aware that, lalo na sa social media, no, and among friends when they talk, some young people would say, bakit ka affected? Wala ka naman doon nung martial law. May mga ganon. No? There are people who say
young
that.
people study. Young people now have access to information, to historical truth. And I'm a teacher, and the role of teachers and students is to actually know the facts. And that's why I feel the Supreme Court decision was really, it was a body blow to historical truth.
Where do we go from here, Congressman Castro?
Before I proceed,
yes, sir.
Pia, I would like to comment on the statement of Professor Garcia. Of course, I join him in saying that he was part of the protest during his time. He marched, and he was victim of the atrocities committed during the martial law period. I too can say that I was also a victim of the of martial law, because I was not able to go to the United States immediately after my graduation, because I was blacklisted by the National Intelligence.
Blacklisted for what? What
by
did you do,
NISA,
sir?
because I was a member of the National Union of Students of the Philippines,
okay.
and I was the official. I was an officer of the National Union of Students of the Philippines, and I was together with Edjo Hobson. But I am now talking as a Filipino. And as a Filipino, of course, there are times to be divided, and there are times that we should be united. I do not believe that going through this issue will unite our country. Our country is already tired, because from the time of Marcos and up to the present, we are still divided people. When are we going to unite as one people under one flag?
And you're
Therefore,
saying,
we should start, at more or less, we should start.
And you're
Again,
saying that the burial will unite people.
well, I think
It will
so.
help us put things behind.
Well, I
beyond.
think so.
Yeah.
I think so. But again, I am going back to the comment of Professor Garcia.
Yeah, reconciliation is very important. However, there can be no forgiveness if there's no justice. There can be no forgiveness unless people actually return the money that was stolen from our people, reimburse and remunerate those the many victims of torture and salvaging. In other words, justice must be served, and reconciliation can take place. So that is my position.
Justice has a price.
And
Yeah.
reconciliation really requires a lot of work. It's a process, and by burying someone, you cannot bury the truth together with this body.
Well, it's interesting. I was just going to say that it's interesting that the three of you are seated there, and, well, General Albayade is right in the middle. So tamang-tama. Surgeon ka lang. Yes.
Comment on what
Yes.
Professor Garcia said.
And then I think we have like 1 minute left.
In the first place, the
Yeah, we need to
Constitution
wrap
on this
up.
issue is not involved at all. If we go into the law that allows ex-president or even members of the military to be buried in the libingan ng mga bayan, there is no qualification. The law simply says former president could be buried there. It does not state whether he is a hero, whether he is non-hero.
No, it also says that you have to inspire the youth, and moral turpitude, which actually, he was guilty of criminal acts, is something we cannot just easily brush aside.
A while ago, I said, sirs, that we need. The question is, where do we go from here? We need to go to a goodbye to the three of you. So, very brief, 10-second final words from each of you, Congressman Castro. 10
Our
seconds.
law has provided enough mechanism to address our grievances or address the grievances of all those who are aggrieved by martial law.
Okay, thank you, General Albayade.
Yes, Pia, I would just like to say to the people that our participation there was only to provide security and maintain peace and order. We were not responsible for the burial of the former president. So,
Right. AFP, but of course, PNP and AFP, you are following orders. Ganun ba yun?
we actually not an order. We are following from an ordinary citizen.
Okay.
Not actually an order coming from. We did not receive actually an order coming from higher headquarters.
Yeah, but President Duterte had said he wanted him buried. And Ed Garcia.
My summary is 3 words. Marcos, no hero.
Thank you very much to our guests. Congressman Castro, thank you, sir, for being here. General Albayade, thank you, sir. And Professor Ed Garcia, thank you, Professor Garcia.